I had this deep-seated desire to not to walk the same path that someone has already walked. Like that seemed like a less useful way to spend my life. And so I was really trying to seek these edges. And I didn't know, like, that sounds great philosophically, but what does that mean to, someone who's in college trying to figure out what they're going to do for their job? And it took me a long time to find that answer. And I think there's many answers.
I think you found one answer. I'm Hank Green, and here at Study Hall, we want to know how people learn and how the way different people tackle education affects their lives so we can all learn from their experiences. We're talking to people about that, and today I'm talking to astronaut, scientist, professional athlete, and incredibly curious person, Chris Birch. We're talking about her life, her careers, and her college journey. Hello. I'm in the beautiful lobby of the ASU California Center in downtown Los Angeles, and I'm with astronaut Chris Birch, who is a real astronaut, and also a lot of other things, who has joined me today to talk a little bit about your education journey and also just about your life. Can you give me like I don't know, 6 things that you are?
I can.
Because there's the list is kind of intimidating to me.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I've been trying to avoid labels.
Clearly.
My whole life. But I'm definitely a collector of interests and passions. So, I would consider myself a bit of a scientist, an engineer. Obviously now I'm an astronaut, which probably is the title that trumps everything. Yeah. I'm an outdoors woman. I love being outside. I'm an adventurer. I like to be in the wilderness. And I'm just a handy human. I'm not sure if that might have been 5 or 6, but
yeah, I didn't count either. But you've been a professional cyclist.
That's right. I forgot about this one.
Which I remembered. Sometimes you got to check your Wikipedia page, right, to be like, what is it that I do? But you've also worked in you've taught and you've worked in biomedical sciences. You have a degree or 2. What are your degrees?
So I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics and one in biochemistry and molecular biophysics. And then I got my PhD in biological engineering.
And could you say all of those words in Spanish?
I used to be able to, but now that as an astronaut, I study Russian. And so I'm having I'm having this interesting challenge, which is when I try and speak Spanish, it'll come out in Russian. So... yeah.
What are you working on just right now? Like what's going on in your life right now? Just lay the groundwork here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am about 2.5 years into my NASA astronaut career. Earlier this year, I graduated from being a candidate to being a fully qualified astronaut ready for assignment. Yeah. And so while I'm awaiting a ride to space...
Geez, that's scary.
It's exciting. The whole reason that
same thing.
We want to fly in space. We want to go do science.
No, not going to space. I'm sure that you're excited. I would find going to space very scary. But for you, I'm sure it's very exciting. The waiting for your assignment is scary because you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, I assume that you're going to space.
It's a pretty good bet. Because we need people to do that job. And I've been trained to do that job, and I'm ready to do that job. Yeah. But while I'm waiting, I also get to support current ongoing missions, both to the International Space Station, where we have scientists right now that are living and working 250 miles above the Earth, doing a bunch of really cool science, doing spacewalks to do repairs outside. I'd love to do that one day. But also in support of our Artemis program going back to the moon. So I've got friends and colleagues that are getting ready to fly around the moon for the first time in over 50 years. And part of my role is supporting some of the work that's happening on their capsule.
Yeah, I feel like people don't know that this is happening.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, so is that first mission around the moon scheduled soon?
It's scheduled, yes, for September of next year.
Yeah. All right, let's go. But I want to talk about how you got to where you are now, pretty much from the beginning. Can you put yourself back to when Chris was a kid in school? Was this like a thing? What kind of student were you?
Again, with the labels. I was probably a good student, a bad student at all different times. Okay. But I think I found myself getting easily interested in a variety of different subjects. I liked school, even though it was very unpopular to like school. I was definitely not in the in crowd. And I just couldn't get enough of different subjects or different activities. You know, I would love being active, love being in sports.
Yeah.
And
I think that you put your finger so fast on one of the most important things about education, which is like the barrier to your own interest. Like, how hard is it for me to get interested in a subject? And you clearly have a low barrier to interest. Like, it's very easy for you to get interested in something new.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I just recently learned how to lay linoleum flooring for no real reason.
She also does floors.
Not as well as some of the other people on YouTube that I watch, but, you know, I think, you know, there was something in my upbringing that helped reduce that barrier to entry. So I feel like I started with this default position of, if it's possible for me to learn how to get there.
So was it more of a, like, I'm interested in stuff and what problems are out there needing solved, rather than having like a dream? Or were you just interested in stuff?
I absolutely did not have a target career. I'm not even sure I knew what all the careers were out there, except for maybe astronaut, doctor, lawyer, fireman, like whatever the popular stereotypical ones were. And I think that was actually what helped me through school, was just not having a specific like concrete containing goal, but more just being really interested in doing stuff, learning new things. I, unlike a lot of my colleagues who have these amazing journeys, they wanted to be an astronaut since they were a kid. Like I wasn't even sure it was possible for me until I was probably in college, and I saw other women doing science on the space station.
Yeah, there's definitely sort of a picture in your head.
Yeah.
Especially back when we were kids. In the 90s, you know, you're mostly looking back at the sort of like, there's a lot of first era of space flight all looking pretty identical, and then a couple of like sprinkles of folks here and there. It really did start to change then. Like the people who were going to space then.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot more diversity.
Yeah, I mean, that was the era that women and people of color started to join the astronaut corps. Which is awesome. Like we want the Corps to be representative of our society in general. Yeah. And I think that it was seeing all of those people, all of the women in the Corps, and those numbers start to grow, that made me realize that it was actually possible for me. Yeah. You know, I have this really distinct memory when I was a kid, maybe, you know, certainly in elementary school, fourth, fifth grade, and I was hanging out at a friend's house at night. And I was on the trampoline, and I was laying on the side looking over at the grass, and I was thinking, man, how small does small get? I can see the grass, there's probably bugs in the grass, there's probably wings on those bugs in the grass, and on and on and on. And then I rolled over and I looked up at the sky, and I grew up in the desert, and so it was a beautiful Milky Way sky, and thinking about how big could get, and how much further there was to explore outward. And I remember even at, you know, this young age, having this conundrum of really wanting to explore both extremes, you know, the incredibly small and the incredibly large, and the complexities at both ends.
That's wonderful. I think that really small is underappreciated. That's one of my things, like a mission in life. I'm like, we should look up. We should also look down. Yeah. There's a lot that we miss because the world is, you know, we see it from our in the middle vantage point. Did you have, was there like pressure to do well in school in your family?
I wouldn't describe it as pressure. I think it was strongly encouraged, very strongly encouraged. That as pressure. You know, like my dad, at one point in his college career, he was supporting his wife, his mother, and several of his sisters, all living in the same house, all trying to go to school, and so he was holding down a job and also going to college. And he would tell these stories to myself and my sister growing up, and he would explain how an education could give us some fluidity, ability to move, ability to pivot, and so that was really encouraged, just to keep us mobile and to have the opportunities to do multiple things in life.
So did you have a good social experience in high school?
I think I was never in an in crowd. No. I always felt
you don't have to be, though.
Yeah.
You can be in a crowd. I think that's the more important thing, is that you have somebody.
Yeah.
Rather than having like the highest status kids?
You know, in my high school experience, I definitely felt like I floated through groups a little bit more than staying anchored in one spot. Yeah. You know, certainly by the end of high school, I had my core friends, but I was always a little bit aside from them. I would come into that group and spend time, and I would go out and I would go do sports with my team, or I would circle back and I would have my nerdy friend group that we would go to the library, because we still went to libraries then.
And people still do that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, they're great places, libraries.
Yeah. So let's imagine high school is finishing for Chris Birch. What are you thinking about next? Is it definitely like obvious next choices straight into college?
Oh, absolutely not. I actually didn't know you had to apply to college. I'm not sure how I missed that.
We're all learning.
The whole time, yeah. But, you know, I was so heads down. In hindsight, I put way too much on my plate in high school. Okay. And part of that was because I had a lot of interests and I didn't want to say no to anything. So I was taking, you know, all the AP science classes. I was in AP art. I was taking programming. I was taking language, and I was doing sports. It took up a lot of time, and I was so heads down trying to get through my daily life that I was at the library with a friend once. I was like, hey, what are you working on? And he's filling out this form online, and he says, oh, I'm applying to college. And I was like, you have to apply to college? Like, when do you do that? I
didn't have to apply to high school.
I had not had anyone sit down and explain the process of getting into college or what other options are out there. And so I felt like I was immediately on the back foot trying to catch up with the rest of my peer group. And I definitely, at some point, you know, I was a cross-country runner in high school, and I loved it. I wasn't super fast, only good enough to run for a Division III school. But I loved this athlete identity. I loved pushing myself. And this is, you know, way before I was even considering having dreams as a professional athlete. And I thought for a long time about, well, what if I really went all in for this? What if I did go run for a Division III school and approach this new identity and give it a go? But I think I was really afraid of taking that risk. I didn't have a lot of input that said that was something that was okay to do. I ended up making that choice later in a different way, to be a cyclist. Yeah. But, you know, so I applied to college kind of using the help of all of my friends who were doing it more than anything.
Your parents focused on making sure you got good grades, but not so much on because my dad was like, here are the applications.
You know, I do remember my mom checking out a book from the library that was like the top 101 schools in the nation, and, you know, ones I'd never heard of and were definitely not in my home state. And I just didn't know what to do with all this information, all these choices. That it just seemed like I didn't have enough experience to decide what at that point I didn't even know what I wanted to study. Yeah. You know, I kind of got in my head that I wanted to contribute, I wanted to help people. So I was really interested in becoming a doctor. Again, one of those jobs that I knew was out there. And so I started off thinking I'd go pre-med, but I wasn't ready to give up any of my other interests. So I was determined I was going to be an art major and pre-med. You know,
and also a Division III runner.
And a Division III runner. Yeah. So yeah. So I kind of I think I threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and just waited to see what stuck.
And did you end up applying 2 places that year?
I did.
You squeaked in.
A rising senior. Yeah, I think I just made the cutoff. Yeah. Wonderfully, a lot of in-state schools in Arizona will offer tuition support if you know, 2 high schoolers that do well, have a good enough GPA. And so I was offered a couple of free rides to in-state colleges without having to apply, amazingly. But I had this dream, this image of what I thought college was going to be, and it was definitely out of state, somewhere far away from home. This is the college experience that I had imagined. Yeah. And so I really tried to go out of state for no other reason than
fits the picture.
Fits the picture, exactly. And I got into a couple of schools, and I remember sitting down and talking with my parents and trying to figure out how would we afford this, because out-of-state tuition was really high. I didn't get a lot of financial support there. And at one point, we had created this plan where I was living in a trailer, renting out half of it, becoming a resident as quickly as possible to pay in-state tuition, and working a part-time job to attend this school that I really wanted to go to. And I remember stepping back and being like, is this really what I want my experience to be like? Mm-hmm. And so I decided it felt a little bit like giving up a dream of leaving the state, but I was so much better supported staying in state and using the financial aid that I was given.
Yeah.
It opened up so much bandwidth and time for me that I got to continue to explore a bunch of different avenues.
That's great. I love that your parents sat down with you and made the budget though.
Yeah.
We found an apartment that you can have, and by apartment I mean half of a trailer.
Of course, all this is informed by their own experiences. My dad also lived in a trailer going to college. Mm-hmm. And, I do feel lucky to have had their support. I know not everybody has that, and you're trying to navigate these impossible choices that have huge financial implications.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think I just didn't know that there were other resources out there, like, guidance counselors that can help. I think even individual teachers. I eventually ended up reaching out to one of my teachers for some guidance as to how do I make this decision? Do I go out of state? Do I stay in state?
How did the schools in Arizona know that you were to make you an offer?
I think that was just a great program that the in-state colleges offered to students with sufficiently high GPA. So I know a lot of my high school friends received the same offer, which is just a wonderful thing to give people an option.
Yeah. When you applied, did you know that was a thing? Like, how did you know that you might get that?
I didn't know that I was going to get that. I actually hadn't banked on it. Okay. So a lot of the budgeting and trying to figure out how to afford college and where I could go with our budget, that alleviated a lot of the stress.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think you made a great call. Can you imagine like a version of your life where you didn't go to college?
I can, and honestly, I can envision that now more than I could when I was younger. Because I think there was a bit of a negative stereotype towards being craftsman and being an apprentice and learning a skill set. But now that I have lived 30-some years as an adult and I know what I value, and part of that is the hands-on skills, I think I would have loved to have been a machinist. I would have loved to have been a mechanic. And I think I would have been really happy in those jobs. It's part of what brings me a lot of fulfillment in the work I get to do today as an astronaut. Yeah. Like, part of that is we
fixing stuff,
yeah. Including fixing the toilet on the space station. Like, it's all part of the job.
Yeah, we were talking before this about operating flying the arm.
Yes.
Is what you called it. So these giant robotic arms, and how it's actually somewhat similar to heavy machine operation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Down here on Earth.
Yeah, so my family has a cattle ranch in Montana, and I was taught to drive the backhoe up there if we needed any sort of repairs down on the road, or if we're digging up a water leak. And when I first had the chance to fly the robotic arm, the Canada arm, we have simulators to train this. It felt just like I was moving the backhoe around the ranch, working at sort of the similar slow speed and spatial awareness.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's weird. It's a weird set of skills. I'm always really impressed by heavy machine operation.
Oh, absolutely.
Great to watch.
Yes.
So cool. So you were thinking about a lot of different majors, pre-med. You were thinking about a lot of different opportunities. How did you settle on what you actually wanted to study?
A little bit of luck. I probably had 4 different majors before I settled on the 2 that I stuck with. One of those was more traditional biology, where I really felt a lack of problem solving. At that stage, it's a lot of memorization, trying to understand the whole complex body of knowledge that we know about the human body and how everything works. And I just was missing that mathematic problem solving piece. And so I switched out of pre-med. I sort of let that go and picked up math. And I was still an art major, but I was really struggling to get in the classes that interest me. I'm also not a very talented artist. I really just sort of dabble. And so I let that go, and I picked up biochemistry and molecular biophysics. And that match was excellent. It was highly technical, very problem-solving driven, a lot of form, function, how do things work, how do we engineer them to work, that really captured my attention.
That's great. I mean, I had a somewhat similar experience where I went from biologist to biochem, and
I didn't know you were also biochem.
Yeah.
All right.
Though not molecular biophysics. I don't know that existed at my school. I know actually it did not exist at my school. But I also don't think I would have chosen it if it did.
Yeah. It actually was
biochem had enough math for me.
Oh, man. My absolute last semester in college, as part of the molecular biophysics side of this, I had an introduction to quantum mechanics class.
Sure.
Best class I've ever had. And if I had gotten that class anytime other than as I'm walking out the door of college, I think I would have switched majors and just been straight down this physics path.
Yeah.
I just get distracted by these interesting problems.
You are not interested.
That's true. Yeah, sometimes to a fault, but you can cultivate focus, it turns out.
Yeah, that is very true. How did you feel that college for you was different from high school?
College is definitely a free form experience. It's in that way.
You're in charge.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For potentially maybe the first time in your life, you're given all of this free reign. And one of the great things about colleges and for me living on a college campus was you're immersed in so many different activities, cultures. There's so many opportunities to try different things. But it also can be really difficult with all of this option to sort of figure out where is your space, what do you find interesting, where do you want to put your time, how do you stay focused? And so I think there is a really natural struggle there that I definitely went through, that a lot of my friends went through, to figure out how do I make structure and progress from such an open, formless field. And that took some time. It took me at least my whole first semester to figure that out.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fast.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think that's both I think it's both the hardest part and the most exciting thing about it. You also studied in Argentina some.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Man, so obviously growing up in Arizona, Spanish is a really useful language. It was spoken everywhere, right? And I felt like it was really important to be able to speak the language that was spoken in this part of the country before English arrived. And I had studied it as a kid, so I started picking up little words when I was little, and then it became part of my formal education, and I didn't really want to let that go. So I kept taking classes, and I think in college someone mentioned that you can study abroad, and I had had a few experiences with travel with my family, and that was for sure what I wanted to do, is go live somewhere different, experience different culture. And Argentina seemed more remote than Spain. And it was I'd never been to the Southern Hemisphere. So for all of these reasons, trying to get, not for any bad reason, but get as far away from home as possible, I picked Argentina, and it has such an interesting culture, really complex history. And definitely the first 2 weeks I was there, I was living with a host family, no English in my life, and I was like, what have I done? Like, this is a lot.
How long were you going to be there?
Just one semester, but I ended up coming early and staying late.
Okay.
And it was just such a great experience. It was tough. It was really tough at the beginning. And this is before, I traveled without a computer at the beginning. It was pre-smartphone, so it was buy a SIM card and occasionally call home. But like anything, as long as you just keep working through the adaptation process, it was such a great experience.
That's great. So we talked a little bit about just sort of the initial adjustment, but what were some of the biggest challenges of college for you?
I think the entire time you're in college, you're going through a transition, like both in your interests and your social life. You're really becoming adult. A lot of people are becoming heads of families. They're having kids. There's huge changes that are happening. And for me, it was trying to figure out my direction, out of all of these interests, what am I going to do? How am I going to have an impact on the world? And trying, having a long existential conversation over the process of, multiple years in college to say, how do you want to spend a life? And I had this deep-seated desire to not to walk the same path that someone has already walked. That seemed like a less useful way to spend my life. And so I was really trying to seek these edges. And I didn't know, like, that sounds great philosophically, but what does that mean to, someone who's in college trying to figure out what they're going to do for their job? And it took me a long time to find that answer. And I think there's many answers.
I think you found one answer.
One that I did find was this idea of pushing boundaries in knowledge. So I moved away from trying to help people as a doctor, but now I was trying to help our greater understanding through research.
Yeah, uncover something new.
Absolutely. Build something that didn't exist before for a new purpose, to uncover new knowledge. And I got my first taste of that working in a biochem lab. And I think it was a lab that worked on stem cells, which were just like the hot new topic in the time. And we didn't understand how they worked, but they had all these promises. And I got really excited about this idea of creating new knowledge or plucking new knowledge out. But it took a long time to figure that out. Like,
it's also weird because you spend so much of your education thinking that education is giving you all of the things that we know. And in that moment where you suddenly transition from I spent my whole education being told information to being told, okay, here's what you know. How do you find new information? And it's like, that's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
And of course it is, and it's exciting, but like it's like a little uncomfortable. I remember the first time a professor said, what experiment do you think we should do? And it was like his research.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm a guy.
Yeah.
I'm a 19-year-old. Why are you asking me this question?
It's wild to have that realization that you're standing so close to the frontier of what we know for sure and what we don't really know.
Yeah.
And I had some really great professors that were working at that frontier, and even in their classes, they brought that in and made it really accessible.
Yeah.
And so I think just showing students how to think like someone working at the frontier, how to think about developing new knowledge was new to me as well, because you're no longer in receive mode. All of a sudden you're just like, hey, wait a minute, like, I'm going to start asking questions about what I'm learning.
Yeah.
Like, what comes next? Why does it work this way, not some other way?
Right, and how did they figure this out?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of time that gets spent people telling us that we know things, but not how we know things.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't until I was actually working in the lab that I realized that how much work it takes to, that one sentence in a textbook about how something works is someone's entire PhD.
Yeah.
Like, with most of that being how they discovered how things don't work.
Yeah.
And then maybe they get lucky at the end.
Yeah. Just most of it spent tearing their hair out and punching towel dispensers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not that I ever punched a towel dispenser. It sounds like you found, or like just have, a great like balance between always like getting really focused and really interested, but also some other part of you is drawing you into a different direction, which sounds uncomfortable. And it sounds like if the balance had been a little off either way, it could have been a problem.
Yeah, it also makes decisions sometimes very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it took me a long time to change my mindset from anytime I'm making a decision, it's not that I'm absolutely saying no or scrapping this path that looks really interesting to me, but rather I'm walking parallel to it for a while. It is a temporal displacement, and part of the, I was always seeking what is the absolute best decision to make, like just I want to know what the best thing to do is, right? And it turns out every economist is laughing at me because preference plays such an important part in our decision making, and it's super undervalued.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I was like, hey, wait a minute, my preference is what matters most here. And I think I learned that lesson really late in life. And I wish that, high school level Chris, college Chris, had known that preference for even in that moment is really important, and to listen to it.
So like actually not asking the big sort of like what like the big philosophical question, but rather what do I want?
Yeah, or if you're in pursuit of how to answer this big philosophical question, letting your preference absolutely break the tie.
Yeah, resonates with me for sure. So eventually you lock in on a major, you can't change, junior year, whatever, it's not time to change anymore. You're stuck.
At some point you are stuck. Yeah, unless you want to go back to the beginning.
A bunch more money.
Yeah.
Are you starting to look at what you could be doing next? I mean, what is the sort of like moment where you're thinking about graduating and you don't know what comes next look like?
Yeah. And that's such a hard question to ask. I think even at the end, you still had amassed enough credits that I could have switched to pre-med to do something different. But I was definitely still, captured by this.
Did you do that on purpose?
Which?
Did you try to keep the options open by keeping your credits balanced?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
You can. But...
You totally can. Yeah. No, I definitely was just lucky in that sense. Yeah. But I think I was still really attracted to this idea to contribute to the field of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And, I started working in the lab and I saw research as a way to do that. And in biological engineering, that field, you have to go all the way.
Yeah.
Like to really start to come into your own and to understand the field, to ask good questions, you have to go to grad school. Yeah.
Did you know that then? Did you understand that?
I didn't know how far you had to go. Yeah. I just knew that grad school was the next step.
Yeah.
So I definitely didn't see what that career looked like. I could see the other professors around me and said, okay, well, that's maybe what that looks like. Mm-hmm. I also read a bunch of Richard Preston in high school, he is the author of the book, The Outbreak, what the movie Outbreak is based off of. Gotcha. But I was fascinated by this idea of maybe working for the CDC, doing a little bit of biodefense work, getting into these really scary viruses that are out there and figuring out how they work. And so grad school was sort of a natural next step. I took it a little bit, with a lot of excitement, but a little bit unsure that was the right step. But just went into it, just made the leap.
And did you have sufficient interest from grad schools that seemed like a sort of a low barrier choice? Were there people who wanted, because there are certain degrees where grad schools will actually pay you instead of you having to pay them.
Yes, and luckily biological engineering is one of those fields.
Yeah.
So that was another excellent opportunity where you get paid to receive training and then contribute to the field.
Right.
And so
not necessarily a lot.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, NIH minimum salaries are low. But I do remember thinking, as someone coming out of college, wow, this is great. I can sort of have a job that it pays enough to survive on, but I can also complete the dream of living somewhere else, go out of state, and do research, contribute to the field.
So you got to have a little bit of your college dream of getting away a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. I mean, some of that I definitely felt like Argentina, and studying abroad in Argentina took care of that feeling of exposure, but travel is just something I love, so it was great to live somewhere else.
Did you apply to a number of different schools, or?
Absolutely, and I had no idea which schools I really had a shot at, so I kind of I picked ones that had programs I was really interested in, had professors who were doing research I really liked.
How did you do that research? Did you?
You look up the labs and the departments online, and you just I started clicking. Papers. Yeah, and just started clicking through what their labs were doing and looking up their papers. And I had some exposure to scientific papers as an undergrad and reading them, and still most of them are way above my head, but the topics were interesting. Yeah. I didn't know totally what the impacts of what their research was, but yeah, it again, I think you really are just taking a stab in the dark.
Yeah. And how did you pick?
That's tough because I can see. I think I would have been really happy at any of the schools that I applied to, and they all were in lovely areas of the country that had different cultures. I think I just wanted to pick something. The research was really enticing. Okay. The program was really strong.
Where'd you end up?
I did end up at MIT.
Okay.
It was a great choice for me.
Yeah. So you weren't necessarily trying to find the best weather.
I know. I did leave Boston in the terrible winter they had as the year that I finally graduated.
Yeah.
I was happy to be leaving, but I never lived on the East Coast, and that was an attractive piece.
Yeah.
Something different.
Totally. And what did you study? What research did you do?
So I was totally convinced that I was going to go to MIT and work with a department head who was doing mathematical modeling applied to cancer systems, developing new cancer drugs. And I was like, this is perfect. This is my math interest, solving problems, making predictions, and also work at the lab bench. But when I got there, I met my advisor, who was totally new and was starting up a program on malaria and building synthetic biology tools to study malaria. I didn't know anything about malaria, I'd never done a synthetic biology project, but I was so intrigued by this idea of starting from scratch and creating something that did not exist before. I was the only person who was going to be working on my project. And I wanted to learn how to start a lab. And so I took a huge left turn and joined this guy's lab.
Can I try and tell you what synthetic biology is, and you can try and tell me if I'm right?
Yeah, I might just agree with you because it sounds good.
So synthetic biology is the idea of like basically building some kind of living system from scratch. Like taking cells, taking out the nucleus, putting in a whole new nucleus or new genetic information, and having that cell do a thing that is exactly what you want it to do. Am I kind of on the right path?
Yes, you're on the right path. That's definitely some applications of synthetic biology.
Okay.
But it comes down to this engineering principles using biological building blocks. So one of the famous things, famous experiments that started the field was creating a circuit, a logic circuit, out of biochemical and biological tools.
Okay.
Proteins that are moving around, binding to things. And so
using the tools of biology to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do in an
absolutely,
actual system.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Weird.
Super weird, super cool.
Super technical.
There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that.
Yeah.
You know, you can build sensors, build new drugs to help people, build smart cells. Yeah.
So that sounds like the career. Like now you're in a synthetic biology lab, you're doing malaria research, you're like the only person on your project, you're doing like cutting edge stuff,
Yeah.
you have knowledge that basically no one else in the world has. 40 years later you retire. That's not what happened.
Well, yeah, what happened? What happened was, so I could have been doing that research, I think, in any other lab, but I happened to be doing this in a lab in Boston, and I didn't have a car. So, I mean, if you have to go to work in your synthetic biology lab, and if you live off campus, live far away, a bike is a great place to get there.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't end up running for a Division III school, but I was still really athletic and really liked racing. I had a very brief stint in triathlon that I don't often admit to.
I don't know why it would be embarrassing, but
it's not really. But cyclists love to give triathletes a hard time.
Oh, okay. That's an important piece of knowledge about cyclists.
It's cyclist culture, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we like our one sport. We're not good enough to do all three sports, so we like to make fun of triathletes. But I ended up getting into cycling through triathlon, and the cycling team at MIT was really well established, and it turns out their women's team was really good. And
you were like, I can be really good.
No, I was just like, what's cycling? Like, you know, I like to ride bikes, so it seems this is hard. I get a good workout.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing of the tactics of cycling. I assumed it was like a time trial. It's just you going as hard as you can will beat the other person. Nothing could be further from the truth in cycling. Thank God, because I am not, you know, God's genetic gift to the cycling world. Yeah. I have an average VO2 max. I'm an average athlete. I just love racing. I love the games.
The strategy.
I'm sneaky. I'm aggressive. I can steal the wheel. We call it stealing the wheel. To hide out of the wind. So I use all these other strategies to try and win, which for me makes it really fun. When you're the unlikely person, if you rack and stack everyone's fitness levels, if you're the underdog to win, and yet you can still use all your tools to make it happen, it's a really cool sport.
So that starts to take over your life.
Much to the chagrin of my advisor.
Yeah.
A little bit.
No, and also the malaria was like, yes.
Yeah.
we got rid of her.
We leave them alone in the lab too long. They're all like, we need attention. The cell is gonna die. Okay. But you know, for me, it was a great social outlet as well. So it was a stress outlet to be physically active outside the lab when, as with every project that you're starting from scratch, nothing worked. Mm-hmm. Nothing worked for a long time. I met people that were doing interesting research in other fields like mechanical engineering, aeronautics, math, physics, all on the cycling team. Yeah. And of course, we're all type A personalities, and so we are applying the same rigorous data acquisition and analysis from our labs also to our power analysis on the bike, strategy, debriefing.
Wild.
And so we got pretty good.
Did you come out? So you got through undergrad, full ride scholarship.
Yes.
Grad school also no debt.
No
so
debt.
Did you come out of it debt free?
Yes.
Nice.
And that is, I think that is one of the, more than the degrees that I've got and where I got them from, like that's one of my proudest accomplishments is keeping my grades high enough to not have to go into debt for school. Although I do think that your education is one of the things that's actually worth doing that for.
For sure. Yeah. So did you just drop out? Were you like, I'm a cyclist now, or did you finish school?
I definitely finished school.
Yeah.
As my cycling career started to take off through various different disciplines, New England is really actually quite a cycling mecca, especially in some of the winter sport cycling disciplines. And on a few of the teams that I raced on, they had coaches or directors who run the team who've been on Olympic teams. And this director said to me, like, hey, your power numbers are really good. The way that you ride, you look like a trackie. And I'd spend some time on the velodromes racing the track, and which is a totally different style of racing than I had been focused on. And he said, if you really commit to this, I think you've got a shot to go to the Olympics. And I think as soon as someone says the Olympics word, you just can't shake it.
Yeah.
So I talked to a lot of coaches about what should I do, and I was looking at basically graduating with my PhD and stopping that path. And it was really frightening. It was really scary to do because I'd never raced on a track outside my local velodrome, which was a go-kart track. Not the steep.
Doesn't have. It's not actually built the same way.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have the steep 45-degree banked angles.
Concrete slab.
Yep. Yeah, which has a top speed you don't want to exceed because it'll go flying off the side. It was so hard to make that choice.
Yeah.
Because I was 20-something, having invested all this time into what could have turned into an immediately pretty successful synthetic biology career. But I wasn't getting any younger. And
did you feel like you could get back? You could go back to that if you needed to?
I don't think...
you would eventually not be a professional cyclist anymore. That's not a thing for 56-year-olds.
That's true. Yeah, actually, it's an interesting path for a lot of female cyclists because the sport is not well supported for women. We don't earn a sufficiently high minimum wage, so a lot of women have degrees, other careers that they have on the outside, and still manage to compete. But I don't think I received a lot of input from academia saying that, if you leave for this and come back, you'll be welcomed.
Okay.
There was an expectation that you are fully committed to this path. And I tried so hard to tell myself that I was going to find a way back. So I wanted to be at the end of pursuing this, I was going to have to find a way back. And there was a Forbes article that came out about that time that was, the headline was something like, why you should hire professional athletes for your startup. And I printed this out and I held on to it because I said, all right, well, whenever I'm done with trying to chase the Olympic dream, I'm going to apply for every job with this as, the attachment to my cover letter. Because I was really afraid of this door forever closing.
Yeah.
And what that looked like when I finally made this leap, and it's probably the biggest leap I've taken in my life with no safety net, is I graduated, I walked in commencement, I celebrated, I had the fancy PhD robes and the hat. I put everything that I was going to own and keep into my 2-door Honda Civic, and I drove from Boston to Los Angeles, where the indoor wooden velodrome was, to start training. I had a coach. I had no job. I had no apartment. I stayed with a friend.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, you're not getting paid to do that.
Nope.
How'd you support it?
I'm paying my coach. I had a little bit of savings from grad school, from my grad school stipend, if you can believe it. And I was living off of that while I looked for a job. And in this desperation to try and keep the academic science path open, I accepted a job teaching at the University of California, Riverside.
That sounds great, actually. Yeah, I mean, you need a job.
You do need a job. You do need a job. One of the untold parts of the glamorous life of a professional athlete is, for the most part, you have to make it before you get support. And so you're trying to climb the rungs of the sport, dedicating more and more of your time to training, recovery, but you still have to support yourself. You still have to have a roof and food. And a lot of times the equipment is expensive, and you have to pay for a coach. And so, I think it's really tough to make it in sport. That
sounds like a wild set of choices, but is amazing. How is teaching?
I think so far, except maybe, prior to becoming an astronaut, the biggest impact that I've had on the world was being a teacher, especially being a teacher at the University of California, Riverside. It was my first year teaching. It was really difficult. You have to develop all of your teaching materials for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a high school teacher will have a degree in education.
Yeah.
But professors don't.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my first class was a biochemistry class, 80 students in the auditorium. And I remember walking in and thinking, man, I really don't want any of them leaving here feeling like I wasted their time. They're paying to be here. A lot of them are, taking time away from their jobs, or they've borrowed the family car to be there. And I wanted to really make it worth their time. And they were so bright. They were so much fun to work with. We had some really great conversations, asking all these interesting questions that I used to love to ask as a scientist, just in the classroom doing these thought experiments.
How long did you teach?
I taught at UC Riverside for 1 year. Okay. The commute back to the LA track was pretty brutal.
That's why it was out of desperation. The commute.
A 90-mile.
I hadn't put that together.
A 90-mile one-way back to the track, which is not too far from here where we're sitting. That was really challenging. So I was able to sort of switch gears from a strictly biochemistry department job into a writing center. So I took a job as a Hickson Writing Center STEM specialist at Caltech.
So now you're synthesizing research into stuff people can understand, like that kind of writing?
Absolutely, and more importantly, still being a teacher to teach people how to do that themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you know how to do that?
Weirdly, I sort of had this second career path going alongside that I didn't realize was there.
You're going to tell me about a different, some stuff we didn't hit already?
Yeah. So when I was a grad student, I actually joined the inaugural writing lab in the biological engineering department. Okay. So we were the first cohort of grad students to come in and teach other grad students, undergrads, and even work with postdocs on how to communicate technical information effectively.
Cool.
I think that's a huge skill in research. Is, if people, you can't share what you're doing with the broader audience, then it doesn't really matter that you did the work. So I used those skills and brought those to Caltech, and worked with a bunch of different professors, postdocs, undergrads to improve their technical writing grants, writing research papers.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it was a much shorter commute and a really nice community to be a part of.
Did you end up going to the Olympics?
I did not.
Oh.
It was really tough. I was in the form of my life in 2020 going into Olympic selection, setting personal records left and right, and COVID hit.
Oh.
And it delayed our Olympic selection a year. And I'm already about 10 years older than the average of the team at this point. and really fighting for every last bit of form I can get, and no more racing opportunities during COVID.
Yeah.
And so it was actually during this weird limbo period when I applied to be an astronaut. I was sitting in the dorm rooms at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. It was after our morning track session and before our afternoon track session. I was really tired. And I'd been sort of keeping an eye out for the astronaut selection to open. When I was in grad school, it was when the last selection opened. And I thought, oh man, they take scientists. This is amazing. I'm not at a place where I'm ready to give up the path I'm going on right now, but I'm going to think about this.
And you could print out that Forbes article.
Yeah.
You're like, look.
Yeah. You want athletes. But I did my research, and I learned that actually many members of the astronaut corps were athletes, both professionally or in their collegiate careers. And there's a camaraderie, that teamwork, that's a really important skill for being an astronaut, and working in these smaller teams in really stressful situations. And I threw my hat out there, applied, and I was actually going through astronaut selections the following year in 2021 at the same time that they were making Olympic selections. And so during my first astronaut interview, I told them, like, I'm currently waiting to see, I qualified for the Olympics, but I don't know if I'm going to get to race. And here I am saying, like, but if I had to choose, I would like to go to space. But it was, I don't think I've ever lived with so much uncertainty for so long. It was exhausting.
What I know of becoming an astronaut is that basically anyone can apply.
Yeah.
At what point did you go from thinking, this is something I'll do, to thinking, this is something that could actually happen? Like, did you start out there where you're like, I'm actually pretty amazing?
Absolutely not. No, I really felt like it was a long shot.
Sure, yeah.
When I first applied online.
Yeah, because it's, I don't know, like what how many zeros are between the one before the 1%,
right,
of people who apply.
And the people that apply are just incredible, just talented humans from all walks of life and different career paths. And you can see that represented in who was currently an astronaut when I was applying. And I thought, well, this is amazing. And I felt like I really felt the odds were not in my favor. But I actually got a call to come interview, which was really unexpected. I got a phone call from a Houston area code, and I said, I don't know anyone from Houston. Deny. They had to call back a couple times and leave a message. And it was when I was going through the interview process, and I met the astronauts, and I met the other people who were applying, and I just felt like every day I spent there, it felt more and more of a good fit for me, for the curiosity that everyone brings to the job every day, for the excitement that we all feel for doing things on the frontier. Everyone is an explorer at heart. It was really like I'd found my people. And I would just hope that maybe they felt the same.
Yeah. So you were did you then was there training that you went through before being selected as an astronaut? Or
specific to being an astronaut?
I don't know. Were you with people in a room that were also candidates?
Yeah. So as part of the interview process, they will bring qualified candidates to Johnson Space Center for the first, multiple interviews.
Okay.
The first was...
And they have you hang out.
Yeah.
That's great.
One of the more advanced interviews, we actually get to live together on site in the astronaut quarantine facility.
It's not really an interview at that point. That's
the whole thing.
Summer camp.
The whole thing. It felt like, man, it was fun. It was such a great time. It felt to me, it didn't feel like an interview.
Yeah.
It was still just a life-changing opportunity just to be a part of the selection process and to meet these other people. But you do wonder the whole time if every little thing is an interview. Are they checking that I'm making my bed? Does that say something about me?
Yeah. Interesting.
No, but it was really fun. It was really a great experience.
How devastated would it have been after even getting that far along in the process? Because I'm sure a lot of people, the majority of people even that got that far didn't become astronauts.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I was selected as part of a class of 10 Americans.
Yeah.
And, there's so many amazing people that I met that I think would have made great astronauts. But part of it is they're looking for a class that works well together.
Yeah. It's like casting a movie. It's like just this person and this person, and like, what do they all fill the same role?
I'll take your word for it, but yes, that sounds exactly right. And every step of the way, I felt like I was more and more aligned with my personal philosophical values, with the joy of doing hands-on work, and this was this wonderful blend of both highly technical yet very operational that I loved. Mm-hmm. So at the end of that, I was sure I was going to be absolutely devastated if I didn't get it. And I know, like, when I got the call, it was just one of the most special moments of my life.
That sounds pretty great. What are the hard parts of being an astronaut?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we all love to be challenged. And so it's not really like the challenging technical parts or the challenging hand-eye coordination or even the physical challenge of diving underwater for 6 hours in a spacesuit, which is challenging. We love that. But what I think is
that... in that suit for 6 hours straight?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's awesome.
It smells great in there.
We have recirculating air. It's a wonderful system. No, I actually being in the spacesuit and training underwater is one of my favorite activities.
Yeah.
The hardest part is really finding balance. I might start my day, in the cockpit of a T-38, flying at 500 miles an hour, and trying to make decisions with my pilot and work as a crew and being hyper focused on the task at hand so we can execute our mission safely. But then once we land and we debrief, then I'm off to go speak Russian, and I have to go turn on another part of my brain to try and speak Russian with my instructor, improve those skills. And then I might go from there to then a emergency response class for how do I handle a fire aboard space station. And some of the best advice that we were given when we first came in as astronauts was to be where your feet are, and just to be fully present with what you're doing in that moment. And that's so true for us because we're constantly switching between these incredibly high demanding situations where it's not just us and our crewmates that require our full attention. There's also hundreds of trainers and engineers that have helped prepare the situation for us, or prepare our training or prep the jet. Like we want to be ready for all those people, and it's really hard to switch and be fully on all the time.
It sounds mentally exhausting.
It can be. You have to find ways to refresh, and I think part of that is just being fully immersed in what you're doing and being present and enjoying it.
There's a lot that we have talked about, a lot of different things that you've been drawn toward. Is there anything that ties all of those things together?
The way that I see it is that all of these threads of my life and all of these interests are guided by this underlying desire to explore, to do something new, to be at the frontier and have hands-on. All of my academic pursuits are all about finding new things, building new things. The side quests have all been about pushing myself as hard as possible. Trying to go to the Olympics was trying to discover how mentally and physically far I can push myself. All of those pieces are guided by what can be done, what is possible.
You talked a little bit early on about cultivating that interest. Is that an active process for you, or do you feel like there's just a low barrier for you?
I think it's...
Like if you have to, like suddenly you're like, maybe I didn't want to learn Russian, but now I have to.
But some days, I mean, clearly Russian wasn't the first language I chose. I chose Spanish, but I think you can absolutely cultivate that interest in things. I think cultivating one's own curiosity is a really great practice, and it can be applied to anything that you do in your daily life.
What do you think are the things that you carried out of your education, of college and grad school, that you carried forward that was probably like one of the most important things for you?
I mean, all of the technical details and the facts I memorized in college and in grad school are now obsolete, right? They are so far behind the front lines now, they are almost useless, right? Yeah. And so I think the most valuable thing that I got out of my college and grad school educations was learning how to think, learning how to question what's written in a book. Like we used to say, for example, that the pieces of DNA we didn't understand are junk DNA.
Yeah.
And now we're finding out that those are some of the most important parts of how we work as humans. And I think always questioning and figuring out how to actually test a question, those lessons learned in college are what I'll take away.
Yeah.
And those are still the same skills that I apply to any field, any type of learning, and also lets you pivot. If I did want to go back to science, when I want to go back to science, there's a foundational skill set there now because of the college and grad school experiences that will let me rebuild with the new set of knowledge that's out there.
Absolutely. And you're going to have an amazing career as an astronaut, and I hope when you come back to Earth, you have an amazing career as a teacher, because I loved watching you, just that moment you talk about your first cohort of students. It really felt like there was a lot of spark there inside of you for that. So, and I love that. Obviously, getting information into people and helping them understand that they can be a part of the process of uncovering knowledge is so wonderful.
Yeah. And seeing their spark, when they get it, when they realize that they have the ability to ask those questions, it's awesome. I think everyone should be a teacher even a mentor, just for a little part of your life.
You would do it all over the same way again?
Oh, who knows? I would make a lot of. I would always take big risks. I've never regretted one risk that I haven't taken. They've been hard. They've been really hard. And I don't know anything about the paths I didn't take at the time.
Yeah.
But I have grown in ways I didn't expect, and it has landed me in a great, happy place. And I think I've got high confidence in making it work.
Yeah.
I think when you take a risk and you don't have a safety net, you learn to really believe in yourself that you can make this happen.
Yeah.
And
there were times when it didn't happen, but there were times when it did.
And that's part of the process is, even failing to make the Olympic team didn't really feel like a failure. It was the years before that where I got all of the rich experiences, traveling the world and getting to race in a bunch of different countries. I have friends all over the world from cycling, and I got to push myself way faster and harder than I thought I could. I've gotten to race at world record speeds. But I still failed to make the Olympics.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like a failure. Right. I
don't think anybody's looking at you like
you know what I mean. I would still make the same choices.
Yeah.
I think that really striving is really what I value.
That's wonderful. I am so grateful that you took some time to spend with us talking about this. I feel like this story is such a cool one to be able to share with people. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to share. I think that the more we can share with students that there's these other ways to live your life and to live bravely, and that it'll work out is great.
Thanks for watching this episode of College Journeys. We're all a little bit lost, but we can learn from each other. If you're working on your own college journey, whether that's just thinking about starting college, or you're in the middle of it, or you're thinking about going back, Study Hall has resources to help you. From our fast guides to help you understand different college majors, to actually signing up for college level courses through GoStudyHall.com, we can help you on your path.